Folks, welcome to the Jake Feinberg Show. And today on the program, I, as a host, have a chance to communicate with a true spirit. Someone who lives in the moment, pouring notes of wisdom onto an unassuming audience, or maybe a tuned-in audience. My guest is love, not resentment. My guest is oblivious and an all-seeing eye. He did not create a new instrument, rather he plays the guitar. It is the sounds that emanate from his apparatus that are sonically laced with themes and ideas not necessarily explored by his fellow accompanists. The sequencing of his ideas open the skulls of his musical counterparts to engage in styles, tones, rhythms, melodies, harmonies, modalities that they may not have been aware of prior. Evolutionary growth is essential for society to progress. My show has been dedicated to humanity and truth through the experiences of musicians. These musicians came up during a different time in the music industry and a different time in our society. A time when you could gain an identity through regional appreciation and a flourishing record-based commerce industry. This is why I have been able to connect with these musicians, because I was able to reach inside the record and pull out these human beings. Through that, I discovered my own gifts as an interviewer, ethnomusicologist, historian, writer, poet, husband, father, spirit dweller, and inspiration. It was like a switch that just went off. I'm a veritable youngster at 35 years old, but I feel like I'm just starting my life. Enlightenment is a lifelong process. I feel blessed to have started my path towards cultivation sooner than later. Today it continues with spiritual guru and guitarist Tisziji Munoz. Welcome to the Jake Feinberg Show.
Thanks, Jake.
It's an honor to talk to you, and I wanted to ask you a little bit about your mother and how she expressed love to you. The earliest time in your life that you can remember how she expressed love to you.
My mother was a very devout Catholic, and especially during the first part of my life. My father was in the military; he was in the Navy, he was in the submarine at the time, but she was continually praying. So I think part of what happened here is a continuum. And I think the lesson here is for parents: beware of what you do. Your child may be a continuum of exactly what that is. In this case, the prayer continues, and the prayer still continues through my music. And when I asked her many years back, before she passed, I said, "Mom, what did you do during your conception period, the incubation period?" She said, "Sweetheart, I just prayed for a good spirit." And so it seems that rubbed off on my incarnation to a certain degree. And I think that has made the music that I played somewhat more significant and already deeper. So it wasn't that I had to try to be different or deeper or try to, or by aspiration, become something like someone else. It was already there. It was already given. And I think that's the difference. And that, to me, is love. The goodness of the heart is love. Already, goodness is love. Without calling it love, it just is that. It means it's complete acceptance, complete openness, complete appreciation for life itself. So that's the origin of it. Even though I was born into a family of alcoholics and drinkers and people who are emotionally unstable, it was a great condition for the music I was born to play. So I learned shortly after my birth, and according to my mother, and also we have on the web to a certain degree, stating something to this effect. She knew me before, and around the time I was 2 years old, I was showing up as what she called like a master drummer. And I didn't realize up until a few years ago that my father was that. And so the fever that I was born with was another extension of love, in this case musical love,
Yes.
Which I carried forward. I started out as a drum prodigy, and then evolved to, that's from my father's side, it evolved towards the need for melodic expression that's primarily relative to the guitar comes from my mother's side. So where there's a line of guitar players, but not really professional guitar players, and people who love the guitar enough to fiddle around with it. So, in a nutshell, her love of music was her love of me, in a sense, my person, because her child was a musical child, in a sense, coming.
You know, I just get back to this. I feel like, in general, you know, so my generation and younger generations are extremely insecure and afraid to show true love, or express love, because what you're describing is a transfer of love. You know, an extension. Can you talk more about just for the perspective of myself, the extension of love and how it will be, how it's eternal?
Yes, we need to understand, if we can, comprehend that our original nature, that is our spiritual nature, is already love. It's perfect love. This is something that I would, when I was a child, dream of, because when I was 5, I had a lot of, by the time I was 5, I was already a veteran in a manner of speaking of certain yogic processes, which revealed to me the spontaneous nature of unfoldment, psychic development, and, let's say, out-of-body, I'm going to say this term very carefully, out-of-body experience. By out-of-body, I don't mean not the human, I mean extended from. So the word extension in the conversation is important because what it implies is a tying together of multidimensionality that we're all born from, multidimensionality. So we are multidimensional beings. However, at the highest level of our multidimensionality is the heart. But this is true of everyone. So everyone is included, and thus everyone has the potential, the God-given or spirit-given or life-given grace of already connected, being already connected to this. So that in the condition of a few words, even a person can be restored to it. But you and I both know, in the face of disaster, everybody's heart is flattened out to compassion. In the face of disaster, all the nonsense disappears. Everyone becomes a Buddha, so to speak.
Right.
They become the Christ in that moment, because the vibrations are such where everybody's time game dissolves, disappears. So we are one for a moment. That's in the case of 9/11. New York City was like not a melting pot of commercialism. It was a melting pot of compassion for quite a number of months. You could walk across the street and not get killed. So something had occurred. The heart was open. That means the heart is always there. Sadly, the heart is opened in a magnificent way when there's disaster, catastrophe. When the heart is, or should be open most of the time. But getting back to this love issue, we are here to be loved, not just be loved or be loving. Our primary, let's say, command from the inner is to be love itself, restored, complete. That means enlightened already. That is our potential. And as children, we are already there in a sense. That is when we're not being crunched or crushed by circumstance or authoritarian sort of oppression. We are already there. In other words, nature is kind of perfect, so we can say that much right now. It already is. We need to get to the isness of love rather than the games of love, the drama of love and the karma of love. So sometimes a little bit of information like this can help a person say, no, what you're saying may not sound commercial or popular, but there's something that speaks of the truth of the nature of the heart. We're all ready for love. But we have reduced it by our culturing to a conditional sort of programming. We need to undo that by understanding our true nature. If it's possible, sometimes religion can help do that, sometimes friends, sometimes a companion, a love relationship, sometimes a child, sometimes a flower can help you recover your sense of beingness of love.
I mean, I just think it's profound. I think you're spot on. I think it's worthy. You talk about when did this conditioning be? We've been conditioned. You used that term just now to want to be loved as opposed to just loving. And I mean.
Well, yes, I understand your point. You have a very critical point here. When did the degradation of our
exactly
integrity begin? Well, it begins too soon after birth. We are not allowed to come into the world and then be called to love. and then be treated as if we were loved. No, we come into the world as some kind of egoic manifestation or egoic self-serving extension of our parentry or let's say our ancestry. And so this is, I guess, the first hurdle for us. How do we get over that? That now we're a self, now we're a Bobby, now we're a Mary, now we're just that, no more, no less. And then already subordinate to everybody that's larger than we are. So this is a predicament we are born into, this sort of, I guess you might say, not necessarily wisdom, this absurdity of authoritarianistic sort of mindless madness that we're just kids, which is true. But we are the potential of the divine, which is also true. But we're not treated, accordingly, with the kind of respect and majestic consideration that is appropriate royalty. We are born out from and part of the royalty of spirit. Do you understand, Jake?
Yes. Well,
we're not treated that way because the culture doesn't see it that way.
Can you talk to my audience about how our culture does perceive that?
Would you rephrase that, please?
Yeah, of course.
What?
Well, I mean, this idea of the inability for the child to understand, even when they come out, they're subservient to all that are older. That is something that is ingrained in our culture. Or that
yes, which is not bad or wrong in itself, but it should be in the light of understanding. As I said, I brought in a word which is rather odd, but maybe very useful in a certain sense. The royalty. See, we have a caste system. We have a racist system. We have anything but a life as a royal thing, attitude. Oh, where do you come from? Then we're talking about the materialism that is ingrained in us, which is supposed to be good. Serves a self-defeative purpose. It makes people less. Oh, he has an ear this size, so he's less. He doesn't have an ear like us. Doesn't have an eyeball this color, or hair this color. But so it's not like us. See, so the materialism then relative to appearance is misused, it's abused, and maybe even perverted to the degree where we have the kind of racism that is total nonsense of you. But where's the heart in the conversation in the world? Where is the heart? When does the heart speak for itself? Because we have self speaking for itself everywhere, and what it perpetrates is more difference and less division amongst people, and sadly, conflict and destruction.
I also go back to I want to go back for a minute. You said that your dad was actually a prolific drummer.
Yes, not particularly. That is to say, what I found out from my sister, well after he passed when I was about 11 years old. Yes. But he wasn't always around, so I never got to hear him play. But he had the fever. I heard about it. When I got a hold of some of his records, paperwork from what my mother was holding on to relative to when she was married to him, and I saw this naval, some kind of entrance acceptance, so maybe it's discharge papers. It did indicate that he was, by the time he was 17 or so, he's already in an orchestra. He was more or less working orchestra in the city of New York, which is what my relatives had intimated, but I didn't know that for sure, but there was the proof that he was a professional player before he went to the Navy. So I needed to, that helped me to recognize where some of what I inherited came from. And it was intense. It was an intense fever I had as a child, so it was just intense. And it led me to meet the people from Mongo Santamaria's band and other peeps that I met when I was a child, and I was snuck into the Palladium as a certain kind of prodigy or potential.
Oh, this is fantastic. I mean, okay, so wait a minute. So let's go back to this fever that was unbreakable. The idea of because you were, and you still are, you were originally a drummer, and at that time, at that Afro-Cuban, the Afro,
for me it was Afro-Rican.
Afro-Rican. No, and I mean, I have hit on, whether it's Ray Mantilla or Joe Chambers, Warren Smith, all those percussionists, all the guys that went to the Palladium to see Mongo, Willie Bobo. Take us inside there and how your fever went from about 98 to about 110.
Well, actually, basically it's like coming home. Well, to hear a band like that as a kid, right, after being on the streets and being raised in a culture where on the weekends particularly, we would be congregating in the parks for, let's say, these meditations or these descongas, as they were called, these discharges, where the people from, let's say, the islands, if we can call it that, the people from this culture would get together in the same manner that people would go to church and feel the rhythms to calm the bodies and then get into the music. Whatever the people could make of the music, and you have several drummers, you have some horn players come out, working cats, or just beginner players. Anybody and everybody was welcomed into this particular healing circle. And so from that culture, of course, which is a beautiful culture and a healing culture at the same time that was socially integrative and tribal and functional in a certain social way. Then I got to the Palladium. The guys found me playing my 5 drums on the street in Brooklyn, in the Brooklyn Heights, and they said, "Man, check this kid out. Check this out. Check this cat out. He's killing these drums." I had 5 drums, Conga drums, and of course I'd get together with my friends, and they said, "Hey, we got to bring him up to the Palladium. He's got to come up to the play. He's got to meet some of the cats." And so that's when I got there, and I said, "Well, this is home for me." But it wasn't meant for me to stay with the Latin cats and the music there, because my particular function, which led me to the Coltrane peeps, was to appreciate my roots as sacred healing power and attunement to the cosmic through rhythmic patterns, which is what a child will feel and understand differently from a person that's learning how to play the drums, who already has a lot of baggage relative to what music is and what music isn't. I didn't know what music is or what it was. I just played it. It was just coming through, and it was my feeling and transportation outside of the suffering of my culture. That means my family. When I was playing drums, I didn't hear any arguments. I didn't hear any problems. I only heard the rhythms and then the space between the rhythms, and I heard the fluctuations. And of course, not having a metronomic kind of brain, I had a creative brain, then I hear polyrhythmic stuff, which is what I wound up doing later on. The polyrhythms came in. So the universe of sound relative to the drums opened up to me as a gift, but then I had to use it. So that's basically why I took the path I did, which as soon as I reached 17, I left the streets. I knew I had to get out of the streets because it was too dangerous. And I didn't really have the complete sense of music that I was, let's say, looking for and I needed to find, which came later in the military. When I accidentally met the commanding officer of the 440th U.S. Army General's Band in North Carolina, I was down there with both airborne divisions, firstly. And so, from there, from the, let's say, the combat arms, while Vietnam was getting revved up, I wound up in this band as a result of meeting Ezra Ben Luden, who was the commander at that time, who was sent stationed to the east, who was sent to the east. But when I got to the Army band, I was in paradise. Well, I can tell you, because it was a conscription policy in effect during the war, in this particular war, there were people from Juilliard, there were people handpicked and who were drafted from the various academies of music, and it was like a wonderful environment. It was like Juilliard in a sense.
Yeah, well, no, and it seemed like you said you were 17 or 18. You didn't have a full, total understanding of yourself and music, and so that to be able to play with guys that were in academia, so to speak. But I mean, Tisziji, it's like I just want you to go back for a minute to these circles, these rhythm circles, these rhythm discharges. Way before my time, it was a neighborhood thing. It was. I mean, that to me was early love. That was a.
Yes, absolutely. That's it. It was love. That's all it was about, Jake. True love, where people as strangers would bring their instruments, and they were all. The fact that they showed up was love. The fact that they had an instrument, flute or whatever, piccolo, was love. Because they were there to make love. That's what the music was about. Making love, because everything else was difficult for the people. Nothing else was as sweet and as beautiful and as supportive spiritually, let us say, as the music that enable you to dance and feel good and heal your body, heal your emotions, and love other peeps, and share impersonally in this particular conduction of, let's say, the sound force relative to rhythmic patterns and the dance that came from that. The dance was born of that. Comment?
No, it was dance music, but I'm saying the idea of the experiential journey, the learning through the real application, just seeing and feeling the rhythms. Not like we talked about Juilliard just recently, but it's like the idea of just learning on the streets. And my question really is, when you're growing up, you know,
Yes.
You saw dysfunction in your family. Your father was not always home.
Yes.
There was a lot of arguments. Did the irony is that, do you believe that some of the dysfunction and some of the and the manic nature of your family actually lent itself to that creative love?
Absolutely. You need one for the other, Jake. We need stress buildup in order for there to be creative movement. I'm saying that's what it seemed to be. The stress would build up, and it almost forced me to run to the drums, to go to my drum room. And when I heard the pain, I heard the suffering, I heard the crying because of fighting or unhappiness, I went there. So it became a form of music, actually. Then it's the music of karma, which we as artists then have to use that. We say, okay, I feel these tensions, these stresses, and then try to play it. Hearing voices, you want to play melodies on the drums, so I need multiple drums. Because I didn't have a musical instrument, I had to make the drums a musical instrument by being able to tune the drums, and then work with the sounds of my environment. So I had to play off of it. And I think that not only did it save my life, I feel in many ways, but also led me to the Army Band indirectly, because that's where I wound up. And I was also, even though I was carried as a piano player, as an ON 5-2 or whatever, some kind of MOS specialty, they had me learn to play guitar. They asked me if I could play guitar, and I said, yes, of course. I come from a family guitar player, so I strummed a few chords back in the day. I knew how to play, 1, 4, 5 chords. We did that with the doo-wop band back in the days when I was on the street. And I said, oh, okay, yes. So now I have a chance to actually elevate and advance my purpose in life by teaching myself how to play jazz guitar and reading the charts. And that's exactly what happened. So I had a perfect environment for training and discipline and then accomplishment, which, that enabled me to make a decision that, yes, I was going to be a professional player because I loved it. And I also played drums and guitar in the Army Band at that time.
How did you deal psychologically with the dysfunction, especially with in the sense that I just know that, like, when my wife and I get into an argument, my older daughter will. It's just very unnerving for them, and again, my daughter loves to play the piano, but I say to myself, how did you keep? You were already intact at that point. I mean, you were already aware of the spirit that you were.
Absolutely aware of the spiritual, and that's another thing. Excuse me. On my father's side, they were spiritualists, and I was raised by the spiritualists as much as I was raised by my mother's family. And so the spiritualists had a completely different agenda, and we're talking Rican spiritualism. So they seem to be, they were familiar with voodoo and the rest of that. But what I'm talking about, it wasn't black magic because they were Catholics.
Right.
It was much more white magic because they were Catholics. But yet they were spiritualists not by way of association. They were spiritualists by way of psychic power. So they were born into psychics, as I have my own psychic sense in a manner of speaking relative to music, and a certain kind of hearing relative to that, because as I said in the beginning of the conversation, there are extensions, and so the extensions can also be manifested in terms of our senses. And so I have extensions relative to hearing and certain things, dreaming, certain what we would call classic shamanistic tendencies, which are part of the healing process. It's not part of the ego status. It's given. So we have to respect it as given, has no ego involved in it. We have to appreciate what we're given. So spiritual view, it's given to you, it's handed down to you, it descends into you, not like you create it. So you're always at the receptive end. I think this kind of doctrine is very, very helpful for even musicians who might think that they're doing everything, when in fact we are responsible for doing, but we have to do relative to what we are given. And we need to open in order to receive what it is that we are given. And that's really the issue. Who is ready to be open enough to receive from Spirit in whatever way relative to our culture and our situation and our capacity is true to our balance and true to our purpose in life. And so I know you had a question about certain things in terms of resolving certain things.
No, I mean, I feel now this energy inside of me, like that you're to me, you were wide open at that age because of the Rican what's the right word, the spiritualists
yes, exactly.
It wasn't dogmatic. It was I mean, let's keep it in mind. You're just a teenager. You're like a young wolf. You had no idea. I mean, but that's the insane that whole thing to me is astounding because let me just try to formulate this correctly here.
Yes, I want to add, what you're reaching for, I'm not saying you were reaching for this word, but what we're talking about is native training.
Thank you.
Native training, absolutely native training, despite the Ricanness and the culture. The facts are there in terms of sharing the wisdom and depending upon one another to know better and know deeper, because that's part of the requirement. The requirement then is to tell the child, that is appeal to the child, say, you know better. Because if they're not given an opportunity or the right to know better, should they? Not an answer. So in an environment that I was in, can you hear me?
Absolutely.
Yes, and so my answer would say, but you know better.
Right.
And I would stop and think, and I'd feel I do. So we're talking about already a transmission of wisdom and intelligence that is based upon confidence and certainty that in everyone this wisdom exists, this awareness is there. And so it's a matter of closing the gap through let's say, majestic respect.
In the neighborhood you grew up in, I'm going to guess and say that 75% of the kids in the neighborhood had conga drums. Is that right?
In the neighborhood, that's not exactly ghetto, but practically, because certainly, let's say 90% of the people had to have their music blasting, okay? Let's say that. Right. So we were saturated by the music for the most part of the culture. But it was a mix. It wasn't exactly all ghetto, but sure, predominantly it was Hispanic, no doubt. And then let's say first generation as well. First generation Hispanic.
That's what I'm getting at, is like you had people coming from Cuba, Puerto Rico, and there was, I mean, when I talk to some of the congueros today, they talk about how the drums have been cut from like 75 to down to 25, and again we get back to the rhythm, the rhythms of the drum and the sensitivity and what can happen inside spiritually. And I say to myself, at that time, the drum represented, it was the ultimate swing instrument. It allowed vibrations and discharges to occur, and it allowed your brain to sizzle. I can hear it through the records. And then you look, and you see guys like Mongo, and it was the way they carried themselves. To me, that's the kind of stuff that I think is that if you can talk about being awed, whether it's the Coltrane Cats, whether it's the Army Band, whether it's Mongo, I'm looking at leadership and authenticity. That cat and those cats were that. And I just would like you to talk a little bit about, if you were awed, what was the kind of the intangible things that they did, how they carried themselves that exuded love?
Well, I think, again, we have to go back to a basic word, confidence. Confidence in their tradition, most importantly. And centeredness in the tradition. So there wasn't anything outside of the sense of tradition. It was a happiness tradition, where you can play your drums, and all good came from that. I think so. We're talking about the drums as the all good, basically, because it was understood. I discovered it on my own. I didn't have Mongo around when I was 2 to 5 and 6, 7 years old, 8 years old. There was nobody around. But my friends. And so what I'm saying happened was basically the same thing. Even though I didn't have my father on, I didn't hear him play. He was already inside. He was already there. So we're talking about bringing the inside out, but also understanding what the inside that comes out extends from and what it means. And so in this case, we're talking about a certain form of dignity and power which these men exuded and had because of the fact that they had this attainment. They had the city, as it's called in the East. A power to play the drums, and a power to find leadership in the drums, because coming with this particular power and leadership is the awakening of an intuitive process. Now, that's not necessarily talked about in school, particularly. Now, it can happen, but it's never talked like that. You got to let the drums talk to you.
Keep
what
going.
are the drums saying?
Keep going.
So
This is important.
Yes. And so it's more, what are the drums saying? Because we know as we study musicology in primitive societies, or maybe advanced societies, seemingly primitive, there are languages. There's drum language, primordial language, significant language. See? And so our hearing then, going back to that, so to speak, is also going forward, because it keeps the intuitive understanding of what it is originally about, alive, that we are connected with this universe. So we have to then go back to a larger picture and say, we are the universe. The heart is the universe, and it's spirit first. And that's how I'd like to more or less indicate to the public. For me, it's been spirit first. And the heart is the universe. And the universe is the heart. And that includes everything, all the vibrations, and naturally all rhythms. All rhythms, like all peeps, are included because they're part of the same thing. So already there's an awakening at the heart level from early life and appreciating other peeps. That doesn't mean that my neurosis completely from my blood has disappeared, but it didn't take too long to get beyond that after I got into the military, where I was disciplined, and I didn't have smoking around, I didn't have was there alcohol and other things around me. Those things were around, but I wasn't living in that particularly. And then through the music, I started to move more towards yoga, because it was the sound. I following the sound. If you hear the sound, so you are the sound. It's already built in. So you need to find that, work with that. If you can, find the string that takes you back to silence, because it all comes through silence. It all dissolves into silence. So we have to go back to our nature as silence. And we're still talking about love, but I'm using different concepts to help the individual understand that we are going back to our spiritual, which means pure nature, clear nature, our radiant nature as spirits. First and foremost, we need to open to that without seeing it as something relative to the duality that is more or less programmed into us via traditional religious ideas that God is somewhere else. No, you are the God. Without the livingness of God being what it is, we couldn't be. So we are part of that already. And to deny that means we are really subtracting from our power base. We are the God. We're not the ultimate God in a sense, but our understanding is just as much the ultimate God, and our love is just as much the ultimate love, and the divine love, if we see it, love between father and child, husband and wife, it is the divine itself. How open we are to that beyond our neurosis makes it a form of yoga that brings us much more realization in the process. Comment.
Well, I'm curious if you have you done any teaching or lectures at any accredited university? Like, have universities brought you in to talk about the? I maintain that through my over 300 interviews with guys from your generation that there was a balance between love and mathematics in the music, and it goes deeper than that. But today, because of the drum tracks, the drum kits, the digital loops, the break beats, the homogenization of labels, the stratification of music, and ultimately the electronicization of music, we become more desensitized. People are putting in their earbuds and listening to music that is not being made in an intimate fashion the way it was before. So we are becoming more callous and less love. That, and I didn't go to pundits or analysts or media people or I couldn't get the truth from them. So I had to go back to guys like Jack DeJohnette and Rockalam and the list goes on. And Pat Martino, the list goes on. Tisziji Munoz to identify whether that is a correct analysis of where we're living in a very callous society because people are unable to cultivate the love that they already have inside of them.
Yeah, no one's living the divine to communicate it, Jake. And so if we don't have the divine living as the divine, by intuition, let's say, not by ego, but by intuition in the presence of the heart, then where the peace going to get it? You can't just talk about it and expect people to get it. You can't read about it if people can get it. Maybe a few will awaken if they read it that way. Maybe a few will awaken if they, let's say, talk about it. Because it's part of our, let's say, recall. As I was saying earlier, we have the potential, so it's there. I mean, something can awaken our memory somehow. Shocks do. Certainly people have spiritual awakenings after car wrecks and plane wrecks and boats sinking and all these kinds of disasters. So there's a breaking open, for sure. But if people are living from the yoga of the heart as divine already, then it makes it much easier, regardless of what the occupation is. Because we don't even want musicians who don't know their let's say, toes from their eyeballs.
Right.
We have geniuses everywhere. They're common, pretty much, and because they're highly trained, and so they're skilled, they can play forwards and backwards and all the rest of that. But they're not human beings. The idea is we need to get back to human beings, and that's something which I got from my culture early. Like I said, we care for one another, and then, after we would play music, we go to each other's houses and share food, break bread, and have some sense of companionship, respect.
And that's the camaraderie of the and the inclusive nature of the brotherhood that and I'm the outside looking in, but have you taught at universities before, or have you just been a sort of a guru on your own?
Well, a recluse I am by nature, so to speak, but not a closed-minded one, obviously. I do have some recordings out. In fact, we're coming up. Paul Schaefer's people did I guess you might say, project, which is called Paul Schaefer Presents Tisziji Munoz Divine Radiance Live. And so that's coming out. So I am sharing this more. Rakalam is always around. He comes here. He's been coming here since 1980, coming to see me.
Yes.
And he's great company. And we're drummers, so he learns a lot from me in a certain way. I appreciate what he's doing. So what I'm going to say is that the music is getting out despite my disposition. My writings are out there on the web. Some of them, I'm not saying they're great writings, but they're basically confessions of, I guess you might say, of certain Catholic spirit. But it's not like I belong to any particular organizations, but I have talked at Harvard, and I have talked at New England Conservatory, where Rakalam had worked.
I just feel that your input as a musician and as a spiritualist is just, it's essential for younger generations, because we are not growing up with the same experiential learning that you did. I mean, the idea that you could go to the army, there was a draft, and you had all sorts of artists and regular cats there. It was a melting. It's just one example, but the idea, the digitization of music and the artificial rhythms. See, it's artificial now, Tisziji. It's not to me.
Yes, I understand, and that's something that Dave Lehman, when we did my record, The Human Spirit, before we took the photo that's there on the record, The Human Spirit, with Rashid and two bass players and Bernie Sinitsky on piano. He said, Tisziji, after you, there's no more. I said, no, that puzzled me. After me, there's no more. I'm not sure what he was saying. Then Rakalam was talking to me about it later. And I said, what do you mean no more? And what he was talking about was a certain attitude he saw in me, certain kind of experiential basis for. In other words, I was living what I was playing.
Exactly.
And more importantly, I didn't have an ego. I'm not in competition with anybody. I think everybody's great already. So what's the problem? And so I play from, I guess you might say, my own vantage point and do my own music. Fortunately, there are a lot of maybe not a lot, musicians who are drawn to me because of my karma, or maybe a message, or because of something, my purpose. And so I have a group of peeps so I can depend upon for playing when and if the occasion arrives, which is rare. And so again, I'm not really a musician in the manner of speaking. I don't study music. I don't practice. I also have a serious critical injury in my left wrist. So I'm very handicapped when it comes to how long I can play guitar without my hands, my nerves giving out, and then it becomes numb. So I can only play for a certain period of time, and I experienced that with Farrell, because we played hard back in the day when I was with Farrell for 6 or 7 years straight, pretty much. And he would say, rest your hand, we'll get back to it later. He said, your hand is out. I said, my hand's out now. So I couldn't even hold a pick. But then, my sensation would come back after a while, and then I could play again. So it's a matter of working with tragedy and ecstasy, using tragedy as some form of, let's say, purificational ritual or recognition that pain is suffering. Suffering is makes good music. Sorrow can be a very great source of music, pure music. The idea is to keep the heart open. If it takes sorrow to keep the heart open, so be it. Give me more sorrow. So my heart doesn't go dead, Jake. I don't want a dead heart. You know?
I'm with you. Amen to that. I mean, but I think one of the things, I mean, again, I haven't seen you play live, but, you know, I've seen some just unbelievable clips of you playing, and like I said in my intro, you are. What's great is that we are inundated with. We're just very self-conscious now as people. What do we look like?
Yeah.
How, people are staring at us. What do we do? We're not saying anything. There's silence. That silence is bad.
Ego. Yeah, it's an ego.
It's ego. No, what?
So it's defeated to a degree.
But I'm just saying, like, that to me, when I see you play, you are oblivious yet an all-seeing eye. I mean, the image, the ideas are just spilling open. People have no. They just have to marinate in them, and you're not looking up to say, okay, I know I've soloed for 8 minutes. It's somebody else's turn. You're just going. I mean, you're on and it's an emboldening. It's just emboldening, and it's not present because of the lack of the inability to cultivate the native seeds are not there. Whereas nobody stifled you and nobody taught you. So you were able to take your your gifts and go with them. And
exactly.
You know what I'm saying?
It's about timing and, let's say, good karma, maybe fortune, as some would say. I had no idea I was going to run into Pharaoh, but when I did this business luncheon with Calvin Hill, who was at that time working with McCoy Tyner, he said, man, who the hell are you? Where do you come from? I'm working with Pharaoh at the Vanguard tonight. You must meet Pharaoh. Pharaoh must meet you. And I said, I don't think so, but you want me to come down, Calvin? I'll come down. I came down, and Pharaoh says, you're the one with play the guitar? I says, yeah. He said, where's your guitar? He said, Brooklyn. He said, you better go get it now. I want to hear you play guitar. Here, at the Vanguard. I said, okay. So Cab went down to get it. And when I played with Pharaoh, to make a long story short, he said, yeah, I want you in my band. I need you in my band. But I told him I couldn't go because I was raising 3 kids. And that happened 3 times. Where I played with him. I came in and played with him, played with Reggie Workman and the cats he was playing with at the time. Joe Bonner was one of the teachers.
Unbelievable.
And Norman Munoz was the drummer at one other time. And so, so he said, the third time, he says, are you ready to go now? I said, yeah, I'm ready to go. We can go on the road now. That was the third time, because then I had somebody babysit my children.
Right. Wait, so let's. I don't want to gloss over this because this is really the meat and potatoes of the Jake Feinberg show. Let's go back to the Army band. What did that band, the diversity and the alacrity and the knowledge of the people within the band, how did that continue the growth of your native spirit?
Well, I think what that did, because it was a kind of academic, you could say it was an institution, even though we still call it the Army Band. I mean, band aside, the Army aside, this was an orchestra, but not only an orchestra, it was actually an orchestra that played, when we were talking about the stage band. The stage band consisted of the classical music band, the marching band, which mostly classical music. It consisted of an R&B band. It consisted of a rock band. It consisted of many different types of jazz bands. And we also had a theater band. I was in the theater band. I was in the jazz band. And so I was playing around the dance band as well. So we broke down into different components. So you had this kind of experience at that time. It was just like enormous. It was huge. And the beauty of it is everybody was living together. So it wasn't like, everybody went home and they went into their own trip in their own world. No, you were in the barracks. So we stayed right together. And so with ongoing conversation. And there was also, to my surprise, and to my, I guess you might say happiness, gladness, there was a Coltrane church. They had a Coltrane cult, a circle of peeps there. And they called themselves the Love Supreme. peeps. And that was my first real exposure, living exposure to peeps. People who were into that Love Supreme, they were chanting it. And it was strong. It was very strong because when I was in the Army, I want to make this point to the audience. I had a vision of fasting. I was saying this to someone else. I had decided to fast for 2 weeks while I'm in the service. And on the last day, I said to myself, well, Spirit, I feel so empty, so pure, take me. And that happened to be on July 16, 1967. That was the day the Coltrane passed, as I found out later on. So the connection with Coltrane was actually cultivated in the military. I just want to mention that because I knew people in there, like the first sergeant of the band, knew Eric Dolphy and Coltrane in Washington. So the circle was closing in more so in the culture of the Army band during that particular time, during the beginnings of the Vietnam War. So there was a lot of karma being worked out, a lot of interesting things being worked out, and I was just there for the ride, as you know, just going with the flow and just being there to see what happened. And so I just wanted to make this point, that this particular environment, which was so complex and so intense because war was going on and stepping up, and then they would take our guys from there and put them in Vietnam, or they would come back, and not that they had to do combat service in all cases, but if you were in a location where combat was imposed upon you, you may be asked to bear arms, but generally they didn't let you bear arms, particularly unless your village was being attacked, and it was up to the Army band as the military to defend that, but it usually wasn't coming.
You said, I want to go back because I talked to the drummer Billy Hart, and he talked about Coltrane's concept of God and love, and it just kind of intrigued me that you were actually witnessing or engaging in these I mean, is it a cult or a group? And could you talk a little bit more about what they were trying to? Was it about maintaining peace or keeping peace? What were they?
Totally about peace. I am certain, without knowledge, that there were different groups of peeps who worship John for very obvious reasons. Let's say his impeccable technical, let's say, virtuosity, but more than that, his drive. Coming from the minister's son, he had a spiritual basis already, so he was already crying, he was already longing, he was already showing signs of compassion in his music from the beginning. Even when he was playing jazz, you can hear his emotion and his thoughts coming through his playing. So that was clear already, but I wasn't into Coltrane's music particularly. I heard it, I was exposed to it by the musicians. In fact, they demanded that I hear it, and they demanded that I learn some of his tunes, otherwise I wouldn't be able to play with them.
Right.
So that was put upon me. So I had to do that. I had to learn giant steps. I had to learn all these other pieces that he was known for. And so, yeah, the idea of the band was to try and use the Coltrane music as some kind of, and it is easy to understand, some kind of church presence, devotion, compassion, some kind of real spiritual base in terms of where to keep it for yourself, which is, of course, non-violent to a certain degree, even though the music's very intense at times in his music. But the idea is to stay with the feeling, stay with it, keep going deeper. And I think this is very important in the Coltrane, let's say, spirit, is to go deeper. Don't settle for whatever it is that shows up. Just go deeper. Go beyond that. Go beyond that. And keep going beyond that. And then something else comes out. That's the way I play drums. It's exactly as I'm saying it. It's where Coltrane would say, he was always trying to improve himself and go beyond that. And I got that from Pharaoh and other pieces in Nuremberg, Art Davis and few others. They wanted to go beyond where he was, so to go deeper and deeper. In other words, he wanted to get to absolute peace, where his mind was just melted, and there was nothing. But the fact that there's nothing, if he had ever arrived at that, from my viewpoint, that's where we start from, Jay.
Yes.
That's the starting point. Peace is the starting point. It's not what you strive for. We're already there. We got to use the peace we have that enables us to be alive now. That's because of our inherent peace. You understand?
Well, I do. I just it's like you said, it's not stuff that can be easily ignited by reading or seeing it. You have to. There's just so many distractions. The distractions. Everything is a distraction in life, and so you can get mentally weak at times. But for you, it seems like that. The security, the ground, you were grounded at such an early age that you were oblivious to all the things that society said you should do, or how you should act, or how you should be, or how you should look, and
how you should play, or how you should play.
Right, and that's why Pharaoh. That's why the whole idea. I think that I haven't been able to talk to Pharaoh yet, but it's the idea that don't settle, go deep to the core, because if you lay it all out, then you will be at peace. And don't worry if you've been soloing for 10, 12 minutes. Don't think.
Yeah, it has to come from peace already. This is what I'm saying, which is different. It's not a movement towards peace. It is music from peace. Jake, this is critical. Music of peace from peace, not towards peace. So there's not going to be more peace after you play. Because peace is peace right now.
Right. No, thank you for keeping me in the moment. I want to.
You are peace. Jake, you are peace.
Right. No, and then I was thinking the whole time last night, before I went to bed, I was like, I really want to make sure that I stay right in the moment, because that's what Rashid Ali. Let's spend a moment talking about that cat, because that was what he talked about, was just a lot of the musicians that have talked about you. They talk about these portals, musical portals that they were either not aware of or had not experienced, but your sheer peace at that moment in time playing allowed them to all of a sudden access parts of the musical vernacular they weren't even aware of before. And that's
very good point, because it's not about music. Music's an effect. Music is something that comes after. See, what it is about the presence, the living presence of peace as, let's say, radiance and light, and I call it art by sound, which is not a form of music, but it's what informs my music. It's not a form of music, but it's what inspires this music. It has to do with spiritual practice and being peace, being light, being the heart, being compassion, all together, being happy, being already free, being enlightened already. Without assumptions, just being open to the reality of what that is and understanding the indications of what that is, so that you can be that more perfectly. And so then your life is one of mastery, which is key to what I'm doing. Anybody can do this if you just slow down enough. And as you're saying, all these, making reference to all of these distractions. Well, in peace is no distraction. Peace is no distraction. And yet we can be distracted by things. We need to pay attention to things. So we need to make clear, offering attention to something could be distraction or could be functional. And beyond distraction may be business. So we need to be open to let's say the union, let's say, or reconciliation of the material and the spiritual, or moving more towards the spiritual as the core and the source and the heart of the issue, rather than the material as being the only thing. So we need to prioritize being the heart first and love first, as the spirit first, heart first, and then all else shall be added unto everybody. And so that's the key to it, which is common sense as a native, and yet it seems to be profound to people as I speak it to others, and they welcome it. But it is common sense.
Yeah, I actually am totally. I agree with you. I mean, it's native to me as well, but yet it's. But you have to have confidence, and you have to, that's exactly. because the, and then I also believe that life experience, things that happen within your life to yourself, being a father, dealing with hurdles, things like that, it gives you that confidence will grow. I just think that the way you were thrust out, growing up in a kind of a dysfunctional environment, being out in the streets and just sort of going off to Vietnam, luckily being saved from combat, playing. I mean,
I never got to Vietnam. I put in for Vietnam, but I didn't get there. They wouldn't let me go. They wouldn't let me go because I had radio communication skills they needed elsewhere.
Right.
So then my ears saved me that time too.
So you come back. This is so fascinating. I mean, you came back. When you came back from the army band? Did you wind up back in Brooklyn, or did you go to Toronto? How did you wind up going to Toronto?
Well, I went back to New York. I had dreams. I had Canadian friends in the military, and I wound up having dreams in the band, and being advised to go to in fact, I saw my future. Let me just be frank with you. I saw about 20 years of my future in a vision I had when I was in the Army Band. So when I say that the Army Band opened me up, that means music is still a very, very sacred and powerful force. Going back to the Army Band was to be saturated with all kinds of music and being opened up to what I was born to do. So the advancement, the acceleration of my progression at that time was almost like the speed of light. It was like waking up. And so I went to Toronto to follow this vision, and that's where I met certain peeps. And one of them mainly was Rinpoche, who I accidentally met. So Rinpoche, Namgyal Rinpoche. I think his name was initially an Anubodi. He went to Tibet, and then he came back, and then he was given another name, or he had advanced to Namgyal Rinpoche, who was a regular person in Toronto at that time, and who had a Buddhist background. So that was very helpful to me at that particular time, coming from spiritualism, which is related to the Tibetan Buddhist path in a sense, but they have the Bon tradition, which preceded Padma Sambhava's visit there as a result of being asked by the king at that time, Trizen Jetson or something like that, and Jetson, and he had to go there purify Tibet for all the sorcery and the darkness and devil worship and all the voodoo that was going on, and that's what he did. From India, Padma brought the pure teachings of Buddha there, and so that changed the country forever. And so I met this person, and he was very, very useful. I was already on the path as being a spiritualist, so a lot of the practices and techniques did not apply to me. I was already always meditating, and I tried to tell that to people. So I meditate when I play the drums, and I not only meditate, I levitate when I play the drums. And so I told these people I was already on a parallel kind of yoga path. I call it the Heart Flying Sound Yoga path, or Agni Shat Yoga, which is what I named it when I wrote a book called The Bhagavad Guitar Player. So Agni Shat means fire sound. The burning inside the heart produces its own sound. If you're thinking music, that's going to produce a sound. If you're feeling music, it's going to produce a sound. But if you have ecstatic bliss in you, that's going to produce its own sound. You understand?
I was going to say, did you were you? It's funny. I just found this album the other day. That another classic, another amazing guitar player and a total spirit was Lenny Breau. I wasn't sure if you ever crossed paths.
Absolutely, yeah. I'm looking for the recording I did with Lenny Breau. Yeah, I don't know that it's in any shape, but yeah, I ran into Lenny Breau and Sonny Grannis and Ed Bickford up in Toronto. Those were three main guitar players that I had run into, and I played with Lenny. I was nothing comparative to be compared with Lenny in no way, shape, or form, although Lenny coincidentally called me a genius. And I was embarrassed because I said, how can you call me that? You're a monster guitar player. And he says, well, it's not what I play. He says, what I play I got from Bill Evans. He says, what you play, you get from God. And as soon as he said that, my ears opened up to this cat. I said, now, how is he going to say that? How is he going to know that? If he's just a jazz junkie or whatever people were condemning him to be. So I had a very close relationship with Lenny that was very sacred at that point in time and space. And also, Greenwich asked me to play with him, so I played in the Greenwich band for a minute, and he played in my band when I got a band together. And I also had the acquaintance of knowing Ed Bickford, who we talked when I was up there, when I visited up there, we talked a little bit. He can come out to hear me play as well.
I'm a huge Ed Bickford fan as well. Lenny was his. I mean, I'm listening to an album of his, and he's doing homages to Ravi Shankar. I mean, that guy was playing. He was playing from God as well. I mean, that was as far as I'm.
Oh yeah, definitely. But I understood what he was saying.
Yeah.
You and I both on the same page. We know what he gets, but what he's saying. Let me tell you another phrase he gave me, which really characterizes his insight into his own dilemma. Yes. He was what is the word, depressed, and wasn't altogether there in many ways. But we know he's a beautiful person, and I loved him very much. We were very close in that way. But he said, "Yes, it's easy when I go to New York." He said, "Hey man, when I go to New York, when I'm looking for a job, I got to stand behind 300 Lenny Bros."
That's right. But
so that's basically what he was saying. What he was playing was more the traditional thing, and he didn't like it because he said he wanted to do other things. When I heard him last time, he was going through fourth chord harmonizations according to McCoy Tyner's technique, and so I understood that right away musically. But of course, I wouldn't want to do that. That to me is like, just because John was in the fourth chord and McCoy had to play fourth chord, I would say, okay, that's done. Now we got to do more than that.
You know, the Toronto scene was incredible. There was so much sophistication. I know that Amos Garrett was there. You had the Ronnie Hawkins was up there. You also had David Clayton Thomas from Blood, Sweat, and Tears. It was like, I mean, there were some big streets. I forget the names of the streets, but you know, were you? So you went there and you continued your cultivation spiritually, but
I was already well into it, but I wasn't really out of the band. I was pretty much a cherry, as they would call it. Really, I was just a cherry. I was just like in terms of the guitar, I was a baby, and I have some recordings from that time. So I was a baby, and some of what I did sounded a little bit like Greenwich, because Greenwich and I played a lot together. But Greenwich was coming from Train. When I would get together with Greenwich, we'd be playing Train records, and I decided, I said, well, gee, I can buy Train records. And so I started listening to Train because I was really without choice. All the cats were into Train. So I had to move through the Train culture. And fortunately, I did. I wasn't afraid of it. It was mostly a horn culture. And I said, yeah, I can do this. I can hear all the things these guys are playing. I just don't have the time and the physical stamina because of my injury to play and practice as much as they seemed to need to play and practice to get to where they had to get to. My thing was not to sound like Train or Greenwich or Lenny or anybody else. My thing was to be true to the vibrations I have in my body that I felt when I was a drummer, and those melodies. And so, of course, I had to lend myself to the culture of jazz and the Coltrane culture, and fortunately I did, because without that, there would be no Pharaoh connection.
Well, I mean, it's beautiful.
He said, no, this is not Train, this is you. This ain't Train, this is you. When I play with Rashid, he said, no, this is not Train, this is you. When I play with Robbie, he said, no, this is not my father, this is you. My father's my father, you are you. Go ahead.
No, I mean but it speaks to also the individualism and the confidence, because it's like you say people were really, you had to go through the train school, and I know, you know, the study, everyone was into listening and trying to comp or to borrow, and for you it's part of your, it's part of your native seed, so you're creating. I mean, you were your own unique sound anyway. You were not aware, or I mean, I know it's hard to put into words, but to me, for you with the injury, I mean, it almost is the equivalent of just somebody who is just, it doesn't have to you know, it doesn't necessarily have to be prepare or always, you know.
Great insight. Great insight. That's a native insight. I'm a wounded spirit. You understand that? I work from that. You understand that?
Yes, exactly. The wounded.
I don't need a girlfriend to make me feel unhappy. I'm already wounded. I have an original wound. I don't need a chick to beat up on me.
Oh, I mean, can you just for the audience? I mean, I've heard Schaefer talk about it, but I'd like to get your take on the first meeting with Paul Schaefer, because that was somewhat cosmic. I mean, it obviously changed his life. So I'm curious about your.
Yeah, I was in the village up in Canada when I was passing through, and I was sitting down on the stoop and playing in the village proper. Where the action was, we're talking about after hours, it was, you know, and that's the place to be. You can find a spot and just do whatever you felt you had to do, and everybody was okay with it. And he comes walking by, and he passes by, and then he turns around, he comes back, he says, my goodness, what is that? How do you do that? And so I showed him. I said, I didn't have it. I was really playing what the guys were expecting me to play. But in the case of my intelligence, which is not better than anybody else's, it may just be designed a certain way, variation is part of the way my mind works. So variations is this playing this and playing that. I said, no, it's easy for me to variate. It's spontaneous variation ability. So, oh yeah, you can play that, I can play this, or blah, 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 blah. But then it sounds mechanical. But at that point, I was doing the variations. Paul caught up with that. He said, can you show me that? And I said, yeah, I can show you that. We need a piano, though, you know, for me to show it so you can play it. Yeah. And then he said, yeah, listen, I'm a student over here at Toronto University or someplace. He said, yeah, let's go into on the campus there. We'll find a dorm or whatever, find a music group. And that's what we did. And it began at that point. He said he wanted to study with me. He wanted me to teach him what I knew, because the connection was established there. And I hadn't abandoned him. I said, okay, good. I felt a very strong connection with Paul. And he had an intuitive connection with me. He needed me, and I really needed him in a certain way. Even though I had Bernie Sinitsky, I had those piano players who were great. I said, no, I need to help this person. Right? And that's because he appealed to me in a certain way. Like, he was so sincere and so pure. He was lost at that time. He was lost. He needed something. He needed life. He needed direction. And I got the sense that music was that. And maybe my music was going to be an important step for him. And it was.
Well, I think that, yeah, I mean, it's spot on, because I think it liberated him from the grind of a linear experience. I mean, whereas you guys were just you were just woodshedding, but you were just teaching him what you knew. It wasn't coming out of the textbook. I mean, that's the thing, that you could go to any music school now and you can get theory books written by this guy or that guy. And with
actually, it was like sharing with him what was coming up as a result of what was expected of me, but not relative to what was expected of me, but relative to my own idea. That means it was self-arising, which is interesting. So let's say I'm playing a little bit of a Coltrane pattern or something, according to the guys, or even a Coltrane melody, which basically working with augmented chords, and minor thirds. So I would play these patterns, and he'd hear it. And so I knew what he needed to hear. We're playing the basic things, but what was curious was the variations I had on it, which was not what the guys were doing. So it wasn't coming from the guys. It was coming from my need to hear what I felt relative to that. And that's where being true to oneself, not egoically, but creatively, is very important.
You know,
to be able to discern what is yours as distinct from what it is that you're using outside of yourself in terms of a stimulus or reference, and what that provokes or releases in you is important to be aware of. Yeah. And if you don't think that because you feel self-conscious and you want to sound like everybody else or prove to everybody else you can do what they're doing, then you've already lost the point. You've already lost track of yourself and your own contribution, which I have felt many musicians and known many musicians along the way with great names who I said to them, listen, you're suffering. They said, yeah, baby, I got it bad. This is terrible. And they're drinking and doing these things. I said, you're playing the wrong music, and some of them would be offended by what I said.
Wow. You know, it's so...
If you're playing the right music, it's going to heal you. If you're playing the wrong music, you got to do what you got to do, right?
It's really profound, Tisziji. I mean, that's... As a non-musician, I mean, you can carry that over into anything in life. And if you're not playing who you... I mean, I was talking to somebody last night at a July 4th party, and they're a painter, and he's talking about copying some artist, and I said, you know, but what do you have to... And he's 19. But still, I was like, what do you have to say? What is your individual voice? Where are you coming? What's your native... What I'm talking about is your native, you know... And the thing is, if that is not energized or activated or from an early age, I mean, what's happening now, I can just speak to it. It's just, like I said, this is my question for you, and...
listen, I have a thought came to me.
Yes, go ahead.
And it was people have allowed it to be beaten out of them.
Can you go?
There's so much exposure to that which isn't what we're talking about. They have allowed that exposure to be what it is that was given to them out of them, and they don't even know what that is anymore.
Yeah, I think I need you to keep extrapolating on that, because that's kind of that's the root of my show. Can you go a little bit farther?
It's been beaten out of them. There's been so much exposure to BS culture, which is pure in its own way, at its own level. But the individual is purer in potential than any culture. Having cosmic root, having cosmic seed intelligence means that we are the universe in potential. And that means the mind is so vast, our intelligence is so capable, we can take any one thing, one note, one dot, one word, and just move it in towards the infinite by itself. But we are so overcultured and burdened by the gravity of materialism and otherness thought, otherness programming, that too many people have lost track of their own preciousness.
That is, I think you just pretty much encapsulated what I've been trying to get my hands around. And I just say to myself, like you said, 9/11, this tragedy sparked the open heart. But Tisziji, do you feel like it's that?
Then it's important. Then Jake, it is on the individual to practice what I call hearing into silence. And and being no more or less than that. And yet, being everything else that we need to be in terms of a karmic expectation or karmic, let's say, function. So the karmic function is there, but we shouldn't let that be the end-all and be-all, the high and low of our reality. Our reality is heart nature. Spirit first, the heart is the universe. The universe is the heart. This is like a form of ancient wisdom that's come to bear now very powerfully in the insights I'm trying to bring into the people as a form of communicating, not so much from me to them, but from the universe to them, and the universe in them. Because the master is in everybody. All the answers are locked up in the unconscious there. And that's what we need to do, is access that. One way to do that is to understand that what it is that being this kind of openness, being native in this way, helps a person to relax into the unfoldment necessary to attain what it is that we're talking about. But regardless of your tradition, you can do it right here now and start to feel your relationship and your true connection with spaciousness, space.
I will have to go back and listen to this several times, just to some of the stuff. I know what my native gifts are, but I don't pretend to be able to capture everything. Again, it's deeds, not words, in some ways, and I think that to be able for people to see the sequencing of your ideas when you're playing your guitar and this nonstop laser beam to the cosmos, it's enlightening because people are sitting around, whatever they've been, we've been sort of, you go to see a live music concert, and it's not often that not anymore anyway, that you can get some kind of spiritual experience, where I think that was the major goal of music, especially when you were younger, because there was so much insanity. It was an escape. It was an opportunity to get...
So I realized then on that note that I wasn't music, I am sound. I am sound.
Right.
And the sound then is a paradox, because the sound is silence, and silence is sound. And they're both one and the same thing, just maybe different dimensions of the same thing. And so coming from there, I realized that music is something I need to do for my soundness, my ensoundment, not my enlightenment, but my ensoundment. And because of silence as the presence of anything and everything that's going on, or we can say the presence of God or Spirit, whatever words for you are useful. And we need to be, let's say, embracing that, abiding in that, and abiding as closely to that. And so sometimes that means we have to be associating with those people who practice that. So this then becomes a way of life, a practice that nobody has to go anywhere else to do. You just need to be in tune with your breathing and be able to breathe with that in and out, slowly but surely, which is what a yogic technique is. Breathing, slowing down yourself, and slowing down your brain, bringing the brain from beta brainwave down to alpha brainwave. And so we need to get from there to that place, and then start to understand that is our nature. We're getting close to a therapeutic state of healing already healing, and then start to begin a process of either playing or acting from that. But making that as much a part of our world as possible, so as not to have to keep reverting back to intellectual, analytical angles that are part of the problem beyond the point. Because you said it's not about certain things, it's about the deeds. Well, this is a deed. That means being in the presence of our practice, being heart first, is very important for humanity. That's something that seems to be, it's easy to say, but it's really something that needs to be practiced so that we don't harm each other, we don't destroy this wonderful planet we have here all too soon.
Do you I'm curious, in Schenectady, do you find the vibrations there to be very positive? Is that why you live there, or are there
I don't live in Schenectady. I lived there for about 18 years. I moved to Schenectady out of New York City because I needed to establish my writings and my spiritual practice. So when I left New York City. And this was also encouraged by my relatives who, again, the mediums in the family. And they said, yeah, it's time for you to go now and do that. So I had to break company with Pharaoh. He was very disappointed about that because we had a really good thing going on there. And he was very hopeful about us playing together and maybe going around the world, things that he talked about. And I said, no, now it's time for me to write what I have been thinking and feeling. I have to put it down on paper. And he said, man, all you have to write is music. And, that's what you have to write. And I said, Pharaoh, this is more important right now, but this is also a type of music. This is what I would call a higher music, which means leaving footprints, allowing, let's say, the circumstances to be more favorable to my transmission of word to certain peeps and putting that on paper for other peeps to read. So it wasn't even about the people that were there as much as we were using that as a catalyst to get wisdom and training for those peeps into the air, the atmosphere, and then documenting by way of various texts that I had to write based upon, let's say, the peeps who came and their needs, the questions they put upon me, and that's drawing out of me these kinds of insights or wisdoms or angles or attitudes or whatever it is, teachings for their sake. And then in the process of that, similarly to the stresses of my family causing me to play, the stresses of teaching caused me to have to play. And that's when Anami music came into being, was because I was teaching. I had the teaching function, and that was a lot of pressure because a lot of people were coming to see me and putting a lot of pressure on me in terms of bringing their suffering to me, expecting me to do something about that. The only thing I could do is to respond in word and in the healing presence, and then maybe help them, whether it's musicians or non-musicians, and they were mostly non-musicians. So that accomplished Anami music by putting the pressure upon me, which was a creative balance, and thus we have all of the Anami music, which came out of Disconnected thing, which took about 19 years of work. Then from there, I said, from an ashram condition or a formal guru situation, I had to retire or move beyond that, and now I moved down to Newburgh, New York, as a result of my mother's needing my company. Well, she was very sick some years back. She passed over in 2006, and I completed that. And I've been here ever since with a much more musical type of sanctuary. I'm still underground, but it's more the musicians come to me now with. Before, in Schenectady, I had non-musicians coming. So the conversation has been more of that. As a result of that, I started to write a form of teachings that I call the Huda teachings, not the Buddha. And I wrote a book, I Am Huda, which then brings the perspective of, let's say, traditional enlightenment relative to the eyes and reading scripture to the ear, Huda, hearing, and then Hu as part of the exhalation, so that I created a philosophy, let's say, based upon the Huda teachings as distinct from the Buddha, because it's all about music, sound, and hearing. And so I've been able to create a certain number of works on that level, and now that I'm here, I'm continuing more of the Huda teachings.
Continuing here with Tisziji Munoz, can you talk a little bit about how you see racism, how you view racism?
As a disease. It's a disease.
Right. What I'm getting at is
listen, it's completely psychic and psychic paranoia. It's really basically psychic paranoia.
Right.
It's a form of disease. It's a psychoneurotic form of disease to it. It's fear of color. I mean, there should be no fear of color or culture. Again, Martin Luther King said it with a great tone regarding that. It's not about the color of the skin. It's about the nature, the quality of the character. It's what they're serving as, what their function is. Because intelligence, I mean, for these idiots out here who think that intelligence is a racial factor, I think maybe it could have been so under certain cultural conditions, because the culture was limited by itself. So the culture limited itself, but that's not the potential of the brain. Now we're at the point of where there's neuroscience, and we have to quantify now we have to jump up to a whole other level of understanding the infiniteness of intelligence, and if people can at least get the intuition of that as truth or reality, then we can see that what we're talking about racism is just sickness.
When I see some of this stuff transpire, it does come across as almost a disease. But what does that say about the linear trainings of Western dogmatic religion? I mean, I think that has a lot to do with it. Is that, I mean, me and you were talking. We're cut from similar cloths, and we're on the same page. But that's not Western culture. I mean, that's not the way our culture is. So, what does that say about our society? Has it been? And this is why I ask you, because I need perspective from an older person, someone who's a sage. Have we always been sickly, and it's manifested in different forms, or did people actually recognize the stone genius of Bird and Train and Dizzy and wouldn't come up with the malarkey that exists today, at least in the political spectrum?
Well, I think the problem here, if we talk about the musicians, it's going to be hard to recognize because they would see that music. Some people would see that music as demonic to begin with.
Right.
And irreligious, because it's not something they can grasp. It's not something their ministers could comprehend and speak about. So the easiest way to dismiss it, of course, would say, well, it's the devil's brew, because it's incomprehensible and unknowable by their level of evolution. But speaking then from the level of genius, we'd say, no, this is just another possibility. See, this is just a possibility. These guys weren't even where they were. They hadn't gotten where they were going yet. That includes trains. He's a step along the way. So if we talk from the view of genius, then racism just doesn't count. It just doesn't show up on the screen. It's just a matter of beings, and beings who are willing to push themselves to the limit, like the Olympians, who are willing to kill themselves to be the best they can be, or get the gold, or maybe not even get the gold, just be in the race. And so we understand those factors. But when we talk about street level ignorance, which is where we see international American racism, clansism, and this kind of negative self-image. We're talking about self-hatred to begin with.
Right.
They don't love themselves properly, so their heart is already bereft of some kind of circuitry. To begin with, for them to say, no, my face is the real face, my tone is the real tone, and this is as far as it goes. That kind of selfishism is a curse. It's probably one of the worst psychic conditions a person can have. And we're talking about narcissism now. We're talking about materialism, but we're talking about narcissistic materialism. This level of emotional or psychic depravity is a real problem. It's a very serious sickness. Now, to take that out of the peeps, that's going to take nothing short of a miracle or a different kind of conditioning. We need to then establish a completely different school of thought that undermines racism as any kind of viable, let's say, legitimate system. And the same with the religions. The religions that promote, let's say, violence. I'd have to question whatever God means to these people. I'd say, well, what is God here? But God is are we talking about a God of wrath, and that's a viable God? Or are we talking about a human being that just can't control himself? That would seem to be more like the God they're really talking about. Lack of discipline God, the God of a lack of discipline, the God of ignorance. Or subhuman nature, the God of subhuman nature. Yeah, there's such a God. Definitely, it would have to be because there's so much of it out here.
I mean, it pervades it pervades my life as well when I make poor choices or bad decisions. But the thing is that, to create these systems or to create a new way of conditioning or learning, I mean, there has to be. I don't know. It's just kind of an open thing. It's not really a question. It's the idea of how. Also, when you look at somebody who whatever it is in entertainment or athletics or in politics or music, you see somebody who society says, well, they are our leader, but actually we want to tear them down. We want to make them inhuman because we are depraved. That's the way I look at it. I mean, if you don't feel, the self-hatred thing is really fascinating because, I mean, most of it's, I just feel like we're in an irrational state now, and maybe it will take a generation or two to develop these new training, new schools. But
the emphasis has to be on intelligence and questioning what that is and what it isn't, basically straight across the board. A complete revolution relative to the nature and, let's say, a definition of intelligence. Not racism. The racism then is not so much a product of intelligence, it's a product of a lack of intelligence. Although we can say racism is a beautiful thing. And then if racism is a beautiful thing, which seems to be why the United Nations came into existence anyway, to make culture work, make internationalism something that's viable and very beautiful and very positive and very equalizing in a manner of speaking, so that we have everybody on the same playing field. This makes common sense. And this is doable, but we don't have the right people in place yet because they're not living from a certain place. I would say, in terms of the field, as I've seen it, Dalai Lama seems to be a person that, and I've met some of his people, he seems to be a person that has a good intention. I'm not saying his attitude is best for everybody or his language is best for everybody.
Right.
But he seems to have this kind of, I guess you might say, universal altruistic basis for it. He has confidence in the Chinese, his enemies, if you want to call them that, his enemies of people out to get him or kill him or do whatever they're going to do to him and his followers. And so he's more or less tried to advocate for his own culture, his own people, as its leader, emperor, whatever he is, monk, right? That, no, we can make this work. We can make it work, and it can work if we come together to do it. That's what Martin Luther King was saying. That's what I'm saying relative to music music, and all of that. We seem to be somewhat moved in the same way. And I know the potential is there because we are, I guess you might say, in it together, in a manner of speaking. So why not continue to try to make it work if we can? But I'm saying beyond what they're doing, try somehow to get to a different level of Americanism in terms of an intelligence center. An intelligence center of some sort. Say, no, this is about intelligence, not about race, it's not about culture, it's about intelligence.
And it's about a certain type of native intelligence because you
exactly
right. It's not you can. I mean, I don't want to be anti-academia because I have a
no. Listen, we love academia. It serves its purpose at its level of functioning. We need something else to complement it at another level of functioning. Jake, you know it. We know it.
Native leadership. You know, I mean, native.
Yeah, universal, all-embracing native leadership. Not just Tibetan, not just Chinese, not just American, but a real uniting of the nations in a manner of speaking. But we won't call it that because that's already used up. We're talking about intelligence.
You know,
kind of school of intelligence.
This is so interesting. You did a lot of mentoring with non-musicians in Schenectady, but now that you've moved to Newburgh, you spend a lot of time with musicians. I say to myself, that is very important in the sense that when I look at Tisziji Munoz and, you know, guys, Liebman, guys that have Moses, people that were touched and that lived the trained school, that lived through that. I mean, Bob, Rockalam grew up in the same apartment building as, with Max Roach, Abby Lincoln, and all these guys. And so you guys were, you experienced and were touched by these different schools of native learning and love. And so I say to myself, the only way the bridge can extend, which it will, is by you guys playing music live as much as possible to audiences who probably don't even know that they are craving this stuff auditorily. I saw some very spiritual music 2 weeks ago in Southern California with Azar Lawrence and Henry Franklin and some guys that were, they're just titans. And I look around and I see some of the younger peeps, and I'm undulating to this beautiful, this guy Mayuto Correa on cuica and conga drums, and and I mean, Azar's playing over the top, and underneath are these African, Afro-Rican, whatever you want to say, these beautiful rhythms underneath, and I'm just rocking to that. And I look around at the younger peeps, and it's all digital. They don't hear it. It's not in their ears. So you have to put it. I mean, Tisziji, I know you do. You play. You play when you feel it is the right time, but to me that is the best thing that you guys can do, talking, but also the confidence and the self-assuredness of playing up on stage and just as if your life depended on it.
Always. That's what I've been telling them. That's how I play. My life depends upon it. I don't know when my hand is going to go dead again the next second. Usually it's under playing circumstances. So I have to play with all my heart and to do what I have to do in order to feel that I took advantage of the opportunity to give up as much as I could in an appropriate manner under the right conditions. However, I want to add this aspect. Also in jazz, as in classical music, there's the same kind of arrogance that needs to be wiped from the map. It needs to be wiped off from the map. We're talking about everybody getting off their high horse and coming down and being with the peeps, and not saying that one music is particularly better or more real or valid than the next music. We have to really, I guess you might say, bite our tongue or something in regard to that. Where this music is viable for certain peeps, and culture and music is viable for certain peeps. Every music is viable for certain peeps. I'm not going to say this is high music beyond the point. We can acknowledge that depending on what a person understands in terms of how the music is created, it's more intuitively the case. We can just get out there and play, which is what all I did with Fair was mostly play intuitive music. So there are different levels of music, and there are different appearances of music. And I would say this, that when I was working with Pharaoh, which is a good point, we would play clubs in say, various places. And they would be more exclusively black clubs, if we can call it that.
Right.
Culture clubs. And he would say to the owners of the club or the people who were running the operation, yeah, I'm not playing just to one race. He would say, I'm playing to all people who love this music, all people. And so this is very important for me to see the witness would fail, because he didn't care about who was there. He was just, as I do, I'm not concerned about it. I hope everybody's there. I hope maybe nobody's there. I'm going to play for nobody. See? So for me, as a spiritual, I play for nobody. That means I play for everybody. You see?
No, I go back. I think
I don't want a jazz audience. I don't want a non-jazz audience. I just want people who come who need the music, who feel the healing of the music. Fine, because you have too many musicians that are so self-righteous and bigoted in their own way, and intolerant. I'm not saying anybody, but I heard enough of that. Oh, jazz is the thing. Okay, that's separation. That's good, but that's separation. That's more of the same idea. More of the same. All of that has to be dropped so that we have more of an open heart first, spirit first, and then there's love. Then love can happen. Not just love of your own thing. It's got to be love of everything in the matter of speaking. Even love of racism up to a point. And then we have to forgive that and be beyond that. And we understand why racism shows up in ignorance. People need to learn more. They need to be educated beyond what their culture or their society or their tribal limitations or conventions are. So let's open this up wide. Let's get back to the universe in a manner of speaking. You hear me, Jay?
No, it's absolutely profound, and it's true. I think when you said to me about the sort of get off the high horses and come down and play with the peeps, I think back to, or I think back to in our conversation, you mentioned the after hours jam sessions that were going on in Toronto. And I was hoping that, I think that those things, I mean, you can point to Mothers Against Drunk Driving, but there was a jam scene from 1 to 5 in the morning in every regional center of this country, in our country in Canada, and there were some of those cats, Milt Jackson or Miles, Oscar Peterson. Talk about some heavy cats that were not they were not off in the stratosphere. They weren't isolated. They were with the peeps, wanting to pass the torch of the healing music. I mean, that to me was profound about you as a younger cat, was that the Titans, they weren't driving around in limos with entourages and cut off from the rest of society. They were in it with you, determined to pass that torch.
Yes, it was really playing to play out of a love of playing. I'm not saying that's high or low or good or bad. Saying yes, that's clearly part of it. Now, in the case of, let's say, I'm using culture, I could use myself in a way, because I've gone beyond certain, let's say, structures, certain tribal, let's say, stages, and now I'm in reclusion. So I'm like done in a way, but yet it's beginning in another way. So I'm beginning in a way, I'm done, but there's the infinite. So I'm done with the infinite. See, I'm done in the infinite, I'm done as the infinite, in a manner of speaking. And there's a paradox. And so when we're talking about musicians who are just playing because of their limitations or their preferences, then I have to say that that's part of the problem. Yeah. That you're playing because of your preferences. And there's nothing wrong with that, but there's something about that. We have to play beyond preferences. And what I'm saying, again, is go back to heart first. If it's heart first, it's not as a preference. That means it's original, going back to the origin. So there has to be some kind of language clarification on my part so people understand what I mean. It's not a preference. Playing heart first and spirit first is not a preference. We have to have an intuition into the nature of reality itself. Spirit first, life first, conception, and then birth, and then life, and then death, and then conception, and afterlife, and so on and so forth. We're talking about nature and the cosmic aspect of this whole thing. Which how can we not play to that or play from that?
Tisziji Munoz, we've been going strong for an hour and 35 minutes. We will continue to pick up this the native seeds and pass along the knowledge soon in the future.
I appreciate your intelligence, and that I think is really what you're bringing to the peeps. You're opening your intelligence to other levels of reality. This is a beautiful thing. I thank you for including me in this process. We'll be in touch soon.
Love always. Love always.
Love always.
Okay. Bye-bye.